Hello, and welcome to Navixy Telematics Talks, the podcast where we tackle the most relevant topics in GPS technology, fleet management, and smart mobility together with industry experts. Today, we'll be diving deep into the industry, which accumulates 600 kilograms of waste per person per year in Germany alone. And still the process is managed by phone calls and handwritten protocols. The industry is called waste management. And today with us, we have two really great guests who manage these processes quietly and quite successfully. Today with me, Bodo Erken, our partner Trackerando from Germany, a system integrator who already working long time with really largest fleet and waste management operators in Europe. And in the same time, we have Nenad Karalić, our head of technical support in Navixy, who is based in Serbia and closed many different projects in Balkans, also in the industry of waste management. Welcome, gentlemen. Really happy to see you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Bodo, before we go deep into the technical part, please help us and our listeners to understand how the waste management business actually look like, how it works, where it makes money and where it's actually losing the money.
It will be a pleasure to explain how the waste management in Germany works right now. And it is still very easy because it's they're press containers and the waste management company get paid by pickup for these press containers when they are fully loaded. And this is how it works today. So the press container get loaded by the client and then the press container itself will see if it's 70% full. This is it calls the 3/4 full message. Will show at the press container itself by a lamp. That's all. That's today the solution. The press container will show up a lamp when it's nearly full. And so the employee of the client, it doesn't matter. It could be a supermarket employee. It could be any municipality employee. He has to recognize this lamp when it's shining because then the press container is nearly full. And then he has to go to a phone and has to call or to send an email to the waste management company. And then the waste management gets the information from this employee of the client. And then they can plan the pickup and they can do the dispatching and plan the routes and everything. This is how it works today. And the second pain point is to know where is the press container. This is, I know, a little bit funny because the containers are big, but on large events or on festivals, the containers get lost as well or get picked up by a wrong company. So to know where the container is also very helpful, and this is, thanks to the GPS coordinates, possible. And that's how it works now.
Thank you, Bodo. That's very interesting. And Nenad, question for you. Since you are representing, let's say, technological partners in telematics industry, where you see, as a representative of Navixy, the main challenges in the waste management industry from your telematics perspective?
From telematics perspective and from, let's say, my experience on this case, I recognize two main points, let's say. The first was classic data gap, because these trucks that was picking up containers, the case was a little bit different than Bodo's, so these containers was fixed. And these trucks that was collecting these containers, they had this, let's say, manual routes already predefined. Everything was working on that way. So it wasn't that efficient, let's say. So some of these containers was, let's say, empty. Some of them was half full. Some of them was overflowing. So that was the issue here. And the second second gap was operational. So this company recently hired new drivers, new foreign drivers, and they didn't know anything about the city, about the routes, about where to go. So we helped them, of course, with routing, and actually we solved both of these problems, both these operational problems here.
Okay, very interesting. That's really nice. So basically, we have very different workflows and approaches here, but we think that in both cases, we're actually pointing the same root problem. It's a lack of data. Yeah, so this is, I think, something we should go deeper today and maybe know a little bit more about the processes. So this is maybe where we should go, let's say, into the details. So, Bodo, if we speak about press containers business in Germany and your previous experience that you had, let's say, through several years, can you please walk us through exactly what solution you built and what actually you can share with us today on this matter?
Yes, of course. I'm happy to do this. There are two solutions for the waste management companies in Germany, what we provide. The first one is really straightforward because press containers have already OEM sensor built in. So it is really very easy to use this sensor data already. How we do this? So what I said before, there's a 3/4 full message, what the press container activate by themselves with the OEM sensors. And we use a Teltonika device, normally known as a GPS device, but also with input. And we use this input feature and take this signal of the OEM sensors and send it in real time to Navixy. So the dispatcher of the waste management company see in real time when the 3/4 full message applies, and he can organize already in this minute the pickup. And so there's no need, or also there's no mistake possible that the employee of the client will miss the signal or will not do the call because it's a Friday or any other things. And if he doesn't do it, there's some problems for the client as well, because the waste container will overload and there will be things on the ground and all this kind of things. And the other advantage for the waste management company itself, it get paid by the pickup. And so if they can do as much pickups, then they get more revenue. So for everybody, it's a win-win situation. At the end of the day, the client get a clean waste area, and the waste management company get more pickups. And this is just because of the real-time messaging via the Teltonika device and Navixy. So that's a perfect solution. That's one thing, and that's the majority of our solution because it's straightforward and easy. The next and the second solution is a little bit complicated because we have to install a separate sensor. If we don't have any OEM sensors already built in the waste container, then we have to install a sensor, of course, to see how the level of the container is. So we can see if it's full, half full, or whatever. We put up a laser sensor for it. And we connect this again to a Teltonika device, but it's now analog input, so we can really measure what's going on. And then we send this sensor data real time again via Navixy to the waste management company, to the dispatcher, and he can do the whole things again. But here it's really complicated because every container is a little bit different. You have to do the setup, the configuration, so it's more work to do. It's not so straightforward, but it is a solution what the companies like as well for special reasons, but it's not so often.
Okay, that's very clear. Before we go, let's say, too far, I would like to go a little bit back. How, let's say, the press containers really different from the some standard dumpster or, let's say, waste management skip, yeah, that, let's say, we can also have in this industry?
Yeah, there's a two difference. The press container itself, they have more or less the OEM sensors already built in, what I said at the beginning. So that's an easy task for us to get the real-time data. And the normal dumpsters or anything else, mixed fleet or whatever, you have to create the sensor by yourself. So we have to implement a sensor by us, and then we have to connect it and configure it by us. So these are the two different things. With the press container, it's just the input, and the alarm gets off in real time. And with the other things, you have really to do some developments and configurations.
Okay, that's clear. I think it's really, let's say, important information for our listeners, because maybe in some countries this type of press containers not widely used, but this is definitely will be future, and similar to the way how we have OEM data these days with the vehicles. It's very similar to, let's say, waste management containers, yes.
Absolutely.
And these press containers basically in future will deliver us very similar data, yeah, directly from the press container itself. Providers and operators will be able to access the data. So it's very interesting. And we know that you already working for several years with one of the largest European waste operators called Remedies. Can you please give us more details on how they use this solution and what data they actually use and how their, let's say, waste management process actually look like?
Yes, of course. Remundus is a special client, and they have their own development team, a big one.
Okay.
And so how they use our solution with Navixy is very simple. They use it as a data layer for their own systems. They have their own software, their own company software, and they use their own software for all the other things like planning, dispatching, and everything. So what they do is they get the real-time data what we send from their press container via API in their own software. And then they can use it immediately in real time for their own purpose. What they like is it's straightforward and very stable. They need always real-time data, 100%, that they're stable and right. That's what they like with Navixy as a data layer. And what the other big advantage is with Navixy, we can immediately use over 1,700 models, if I'm right, of different kind of GPS devices immediately. So they don't have to do any developments, and they can say, okay, now we have a big event and we need some special asset tracker, but we want to see this in our own software. And thanks to Navixy, they can use it immediately. So we have sometimes to another day rollouts for festivals or something, and they can choose from 1,700 different models immediately. So that's how they use it. They don't use Navixy not for their own employees directly, but the data layer, and that's what they like.
Okay, that's great. And if we speak about Remedies dispatchers, what type of data the most important for them? Let's say what they check in Navixy or maybe in their own system.
Yes, of course. It's three kind of very important data. It's a 3/4 full message. What I said, it's a 75% full level of a press container, because they can start to plan the pickup already. It takes a little bit time to organize all this, and then they get the 90% as well. So you have really to watch out that the driver is in the area and pick up the full container. And also what is important is they can control the power supply for the press container. That's also very interesting for them, because then they can see if it's running, it's operating, or maybe there are some mistakes. And these 3 alarms are generated by Navixy in real time are so helpful for them, for all the dispatchers.
Okay, and since they are retrieving some data through API and having their own solution, do they also build in some type of dashboards and analytics on their side based on this data?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
They use all the data from Navixy for their own system to plan routes, to make invoicing and everything in their system.
Okay, that's really great. And if we speak about different type of operators, let's say some maybe smaller companies, or let's say some municipality type of customers. I know you also work with City of Mainz,
Yes.
and their team doesn't have developers, yes,
No.
and they use Navixy directly and use data from Navixy in their everyday operations. Can you just give us a little bit more details about their workflow, how they manage, let's say, waste containers on their side?
Yes, sure, I can. The City of Mainz, it's a different model than Remondes, because they're using Navixy fully. So they use also the reports and the alerts. The implementation is nearly the same. It's we use the OEM sensors of the press containers, and then their dispatcher of the City of Mainz using the front end of Navixy to get all the alerts in real time and can plan their pickups. And also at the end of the month or every half year, it depends on the client, they can create reports so they can show immediately to the client how many pickups they had, and with real-time data. So it's for them the full solution what they were looking for, and they don't need to develop anything. It's a plug-and-play solution from our side, and thanks to Navixy, it's working perfectly.
Thank you. I think that's really kind feedback for us. And you also mentioned that there are some cases where containers might be simply lost. Did you have any cases like that with your clients in the past?
Yes, I cannot name the client.
Okay,
but,
that's okay.
yeah, but it's really, if you think about the press container, they are 12 tons heavy and they're huge. And if you hear that they are lost, you cannot believe, because it's huge metal cases. But the case was, just by example, the case was that on a big event, a festival in Germany, there are several waste management companies included. There are different waste management companies who operate different areas of a festival, and all of them delivering press containers or dumpsters and every kind of waste management things. And one day they have to pick up all the things after the event, and this is a big mess, because a lot of companies there are drivers who don't know really what they have to pick up or which press container has to be picked up. They just go there and pick up any press container, and this is what happens, because they didn't build in any solution from our side. So there were 12 press containers without the Navixy solution, so they were picked up by the wrong company and they were gone. I think it was not mentioned like this. It was just how it works today, just everything in time, and the driver don't know and just take the container what they can see. So you see 12 containers were just lost because they couldn't really show the driver the pickup point on a map. What we can do with Navixy as well, we can show them on the map where the pickup point is, because the container sends out the signal, and that was missing. So 12 containers were not stolen but lost and disappeared. And one of these containers cost over 100,000 euros. So it's not just a small thing. It was a huge problem, and till today, I think they never came back.
Wow, this is really a huge loss for the company, like almost €1 million. Yeah,
Exactly.
let's say in one day,
Yes,
company can lose just because of a lack of GPS trackers.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really incredible case and situation, which just proves that GPS trackers, it's some basic thing today that every company should actually use in order to not only have the data, but actually secure that assets that they have. Doesn't matter it's vehicles or press containers, because the cost is a lot. Yeah, you would
Yes.
never think that, let's say, waste container can maybe cost like that. Yeah, but this example from Germany actually proves that if it's a press container, let's say this is really high technology machine.
Absolutely.
And the price is really high. And for companies, let's say maybe you can have case in some other countries like that. Yeah, it's really, I think, important step to equip with GPS, or at least get the data directly from OEM about location of the press containers. Yeah, so this is really interesting case. Thank you for sharing, Bodo. It's amazing, and I think will be really insightful for our listeners. Okay, Nenad, and how your client actually solved that challenges? Where did you start?
Let's start from containers first. That was the first issue. Because this company is owner of this property, these containers were stationary. So they provided us with KML files for the geofences, and we created around these containers approximately 10 to 20 meters radius geofence that is going to recognize any movement outside of this area. So we matched this with the same number, same container with the same geofence. We matched that, and we created alerts on the Navixy that can recognize every movement outside of this geofence. So basically, we created protecting system for these containers. The containers was set with these devices inside and the laser sensors on these devices, so they can recognize all of this waste inside. So they can recognize if the container is in percentages, half full or 70% full. We decided to go with 70% full container in this situation to recognize whenever it's above 70% to put this container in some queue that is going to be in for this, let's say, routing, and it is going to be in the list, so it can be collected by these trucks. That was the solution here. Why we choose 70%? Because these devices was power supply. The power supply was battery, so we decided to put 70% because devices are transmitting to Navixy on every 6 hours. Because we wanted to save battery life. I mean, it's a good device. It can send data more than few years, in this situation. But we also want to preserve this battery. So for that reason, 6 hours was the let's say frequency of data sending to Navixy. Also, we created in IoT Logic situation when a device is outside this geofence. For these devices inside containers to transmit more frequently. So we created a flow where device leave this geofence to start transmitting on every 30 seconds. So basically output is activated, command is activated to this device, and the devices start transmitting. After that, this email and pop-up window alarming this dispatcher, and if some crew needs to go on the field to check what is happening, they can be alerted. Also, the second flow that was created in this case was to return this device to this state, let's say, of transmitting that was before on every 6 hours. So we created basically two flows where one-on-one was matched geofence towards to the device.
Okay, and where did you create these flows? Just
in IoT Logic.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So just to be clear, the ones who are not really aware about this solution inside Navixy, IoT Logic really allows you to create different custom flows. Okay, that's great. And if we speak about, let's say, the next challenge you mentioned, many cities and towns in Balkans actually has specific terrain and traffic challenges. There are some steep hills. It can be really narrow streets and really, let's say, heavy traffic. All this creates specific routing challenges that customers face. So how did you handle these, let's say, streets where loaded trucks, for example, should not be even on and should not be even noticed there? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That was a real challenge because, of course, we had device in containers. We had separate device in trucks. In these trucks, we equipped these trucks with devices that can read canvas data. That was important for the informations about the fuel, about RPM, about loading, and so on. But also, additional sensor was installed to this device. So we installed weight sensor on these trucks, so they can recognize when 90% of this truck is filled. So basically, that was the equipment that we installed on the trucks, so we can recognize different kind of situations in these operations. So on the output of this device, we connected one light. So that light was activated when this sensor was showing 90% of fillness. So also we done this through IoT Logic. We created this flow. So this activation showed to the driver that he needs to go to unload this waste to the certain point. Regarding streets, up hills that you mentioned, yes, that is the situation here in Balkan in certain cities, and they wanted to avoid these up hills when truck is fully loaded. So when truck is fully loaded, they are getting this routing on their tablets, and they are driving directly to unload this. But they are avoiding uphill streets because they notice that they are losing a lot of money on this maintenance. So because mechanical parts, engine is suffering, there was a lot of issues on the truck side as well. Also, fuel consumption was really high in this situation. So they let's say solved all of that with this optimization.
Okay, thank you, Nenad. I think it's really insightful and give us really deep understanding of the process, let's say how to manage these waste containers. And if we speak about how did you solve proof of service problem, yeah, because in the end anyway, management needs to know which container been visited by which truck or which driver. So can you share something
yes,
from
of
this
course.
perspective?
For that purpose, we use native function of Navixy native reports when a geofence is visited. Of course, they wanted to know which container was visited, to have this in the tables, in reports. So we solved that with the native reports, but also something very very specific and interesting what's happened with these tablets and XGPS tracker application that we have. So we created this let's say forms that drivers can fill. So they are encountering different situations on the field. So these containers can be overturned, they can be moved, they can be damaged. So all of these reports they were doing with these photos, and they were sending this to the dispatchers itself, to the management. So everything was there. Reports which containers were visited. We basically created, in this case, when truck is visiting, when the speed is 0, the report is showing that the truck visited this geofence, and of course these reports from the driver itself from the field.
Okay, thank you, Nenad. So basically, you came to this industry as a telematic professional. You didn't really had a lot of, let's say, knowledge, yes, in this specific industry and expertise. But if we speak in general, what did you learn about the industry before the technical setup even mattered? Yes, let's say, what do you think is the most important to explore and to know before you actually start working with the industry like waste management?
if we are talking about some suggestions to our clients, let's say that want to dive into this topic, they need to determine first, and I think that is the most important thing, to determine which hardware they want to use in this situation. That is a really important thing to determine, because here I will not talk about hardware manufacturers, but in this case we use different hardware manufacturers for containers, different hardware manufacturer for the trucks, for this GPS device, and also for the sensors itself. So basically that is the most important thing, to understand what is the pain points to choose the right hardware. After that, of course, software capabilities. On Navixy, like I mentioned, we use the, let's say, native functions from the Navixy, native reports, native alerts from the Navixy, and also we, let's say, used additional features that we have. We done that through IoT Query, through IoT Logic. So we created different logics for the different scenarios. Through IoT Query, we created reports. For example, it was good in this case that we created a specific report for them. For example, for the mileage, because they want to track maintenance based on mileage, they wanted to have these specific reports that is going to be different than other vehicles. Of course, we have this maintenance model on the Navixy, and we can offer that for the regular vehicles. But in this case, it was a little bit different. They wanted a specified mileage when the truck is heavy loaded, for example. So we created that through IoT Query in the later stages as well. So basically, our clients need to understand, if they want to dive into waste management, what is the actual pain points, what is the actual problems. Because like you can see, Bodo case is different than my case. So yes, I think understanding and preparing this good plan is crucial.
Thank you, Nenad. So we have basically two real projects, two different countries, and two different approaches, yes? So let's pull these projects apart and look what they actually have in common, and where the right approach really depends on specific solution, okay? So if we speak about, let's say, the first experience, yes, in this type of industry, and if someone is evaluating the waste management telematics project, yeah, maybe either as a system integrator or as an operator. So what will be the first question they should ask? For example, what do you think, Bodo?
That's a good question. So the first question to your clients in the waste management industry will be, what problem you want to be solved? And what hardware? Hardware, I mean, what kind of containers, press containers, or a dumpster, or a mixed fleet you want to put in the project. I think that's the main question at the beginning, because you have to understand the workflow of the client, what he's looking for. I cannot more agree to Nenad and say you have to understand the pain points and the workflow, and then you have to ask a client what he's looking for, and not so much technical, just find out what he needs.
So we have two different projects, two different countries, and two completely different approaches how to solve the challenges we faced in waste management. So basically, our next step, I think, will be to take apart every project that we done, yeah, to understand based on the use case and specific scenario what solution will be. So if somebody just start working in waste management industry, what will be the first question that the operator or system integrator should actually ask? Bodo, what are your thoughts?
This is a good point, Natalie. The first question is always very important, and I think to ask the client what kind of press container or dumpster or mixed fleet he want to integrate in the Navixy system? That's the most important question, because if you get this information, you can think about the workflow and all the things what you need.
Okay, I think it's a good point. And what are your thoughts, Nenad, from the telematics side?
Firstly, I totally agree with Bodo, and also from telematics side, it was really important to determine what is the actual costs here. Is it like fuel waste? Is it like missed routes? Is it like overflowing containers or completely empty containers? So that was the main part, to determine what is the actual cost here.
Okay, and if we speak about what people usually assume Navixy does for waste management and what it actually does, Bodo?
Yeah, that's. I'm doing this now over 10 years, and when I started in the business, telematics was just to get the GPS coordinates. But these days, it's totally different. So these days, we sell more a black box, and of course, we know the position of this black box. But this black box of the different models that we can use for Navixy are getting data as well. And this is now a totally different thing, especially also you see it in the waste management projects. We collecting data for the clients and in real time. And that changed everything. So I think to say that telematic just to get GPS coordinates, it's the older days. Today, we are really collecting data in real time, and that makes everything different.
Okay, I think that's a really good point. And from the technical architecture standpoint, let's say we also have cases where integrators or operators have to build something on top of Navixy. So in this case, how the flow should look like, Nenad?
Like I mentioned before, the most important thing is to choose hardware, and then based on that to build everything on top of the Navixy. I mentioned, for example, on these containers that we use the devices that have this. They are powered by battery only. Of course, we could use some different devices with solar charging, for example, but that is also affecting the cost. So you need to recognize what is, let's say, how much this client can pay for this solution, and of course to determine what we can do later in the software for them. Like I mentioned, we can use native Navixy functions for many different things, like alerts, like reports, and all things about that. But also in IoT Query, we can create different features for them, and we can give them this opportunity to build something by themselves as well. So if they have any other idea, that can be implemented as well. Of course, for IoT Logic and these functions. So in many different areas using Navixy, we actually helped our client about whole architecture, and we presented that to them as a full solution.
Okay, so if we speak about integrators who are building something on top of Navixy, I know that we have Navixy API. Yes, it's one of the tools. You mentioned IoT Logic. What will be the third, let's say, solution here?
I mean, through IoT Logic and with Navixy API, we solved everything that was operational in this case. That was like this live routing, that was like sensor reading, and so on. But if we are going to do something additionally to reporting, we needed to use IoT Query, for example. Okay. So here, IoT Query helped a lot to present this collected data to our clients. So I think that was the main point.
Okay, so IoT Query actually can help us to deliver some analytics, dashboard, and the ways to visualize data.
Definitely.
Correct, yeah?
Definitely.
So this is actually can simplify the process to, let's say, build something on top, right? Okay, that's a really good point. I think it will be really useful for the integrators and operators who listen to this podcast. And let's close with something practical. Let's say when we first starting and we actually starting from zero, for example, yeah? What is realistic first step will look like? Let's say, what will be proof of concept and how long usually does it take?
Yeah, what I recommend is to start with the small numbers. of tracking devices or data collecting devices, if you want to call it. And so between 5 and 10, because you have to prove the benefit for the client. And this is also what we have to learn with the client, because the client knows the workflow the best. We just need to provide him a solution. So if you start small, you can find out the pain points and also what will be good for the revenue of the client. Because end of the day, the client has to pay the invoice, and this will just happen if you can present him a benefit. If you can say, okay, you can really reduce the cost with us, and you find out with a small number at the beginning, and then you can increase easily.
Okay, thank you, Bodo. I think it's really good point. And what is one mistake do you think integrators usually make when they start working with waste management companies?
They don't listen. That's the main mistake.
Okay.
You have to listen to your client because they know the problems, and that's the main mistake. If you think you can solve any problem and you just approach with all your products and all the toolbox, then you're on the wrong way. You have to listen to your client.
Okay, I think that's really fair point. And one thing each of you would tell someone entering the industry that they are unlikely to find or written anywhere else.
Like Bodo said, we need to listen to the client. We need to understand exact pain points, exact problem. We need to understand it. We need to dive deeply first to understand those people on the field, and then to of course provide solution for them. So that's my point. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, and I agree totally with Nenad, and I think to keep it simple, what Nenad said before, everything you can tune up with solar and every kind of things, but to keep it simple makes it also much more understandable for the client, and you don't have too many possibilities to get any mistake. So don't over-engineer the project. That's what I think.
Yes, totally agree.
Okay, that's a fair point. So before we close, one thing you want listeners to remember from this podcast, just to sum up, let's say.
Keep it simple. I think that's the most thing, because that makes everything possible. And listen to your clients.
Thank you, Bodo. And for you, Nenad?
Yes, I mean, from our side, from Navixy, we are always trying to listen to our clients. Doesn't matter if it's the waste management case or any other case. We are trying to we are going to listen our clients, and we are going to try to provide the best possible solution. And I was really glad today that I have this possibility to explain everything about my case. But I'm extremely pleasant because I had the opportunity to be here with Bodo, because he's a real expert in not in waste management only, but in many areas. So thank you, Bodo.
Thank you too.
Thank you both. We started with very simple question. Where is container and whether it is full or not? But ended up with the system architecture, with driver behavior, routing logic, and a corporate integration. That's actually what telematics look like these days in practice. I would like to thank you for your attention. If you know somebody who is interested in waste management and would like to enter this industry, feel free to share the podcast with them. And see you next time in Navixy Telematics Talks. Bye. Thank you.